Howdy, good day. My name is Helen. I belong from the Frog Clan from the Sexuality Nation. On behalf of Chief Dominic Frederick and Council, I officially welcome you to the Sexuality traditional territory. Dear Creator, we give you thanks for another day and ask for your guidance to start our day with a new attitude and plenty of gratitude. Amen.
Howdy, my name is Colette Plasway. I'm from the Lake Babine Nation. I'm currently working with the Carrier Sekani Family Services. I previously worked for the now disbanded Northern HIV Coalition, where I learned how to provide education and training in the communities. So today I'm going to talk about HIV, its transmission, the transmission equation, and later on we're going to hear a personal story from Alan Mousseau. And then I also want to mention that we have another video on hepatitis C with STIs and how to use a condom, both male and female. The link is going to be in the description down below. Thank you. So what is HIV? It's unlike other STIs that are mainly bacterial infection, HIV is actually a virus that attacks the immune system. And the importance of HIV is that it once used to be, people used to die a lot quicker than they do now. Nowadays with new medication, people could live a lot longer. It could result in serious illness and eventually turn into AIDS. And I'll talk about the distinction between HIV and AIDS in the next slide. People who have HIV can live a long time with medication. Once a person is infected with HIV for 2 or 4 weeks, some people might experience flu-like symptoms for the first bit, and that lasts for about a month or so. Since most people don't realize that they have it, they have a chance to reinfect other people. So that's why it's important to get tested regularly. And I'll probably repeat this a lot, but it can't be emphasized enough, but please get tested. It's often called an opportunistic infection because it affects people who are already vulnerable to diseases. So it's for people who live in poor living conditions or people who are using injection drug use. And we'll talk more about the pathology later on in this presentation. So what does HIV mean? H stands for human, meaning that it only affects humans. It doesn't live in anything else except humans. I means immunodeficiency, meaning that it breaks down the immunity of your body. And V means virus, meaning that it won't go away on its own, it requires medication. So when we were doing this PowerPoint presentation, actually when Charlie Sheen got HIV, I kind of wanted to know, well, who else got HIV besides Charlie Sheen? So I looked into it, and I totally forgot that Magic Johnson was diagnosed with it back in 1991. And as you know, he's still living a healthy life. Freddie Mercury died of actually AIDS, but he had HIV. And coincidentally, he died in 1991 from AIDS. And then, as I've just mentioned before, Charlie Sheen was just diagnosed with it a couple of years ago. The question, how long do you think a person can survive with HIV? Treated or untreated? Treated, or untreated, a person could live up to 6 years. But treated, people could live quite a long time, and we're still learning how long a person can live because it's being researched right now. So that's the good news. So what is AIDS? What's the difference between HIV and AIDS? AIDS is different. It's actually called advanced HIV, and the reason is because A in AIDS means acquired, meaning you can't just catch it, you get it from HIV. I is the immune, meaning that it attacks your immune system. D means deficiency, meaning that your immune system is compromised. and S is syndrome. That's where the distinction is. It means it's a group of medical complications as a result of having HIV for a while. A person who has AIDS could die from pneumonia or any other common illnesses because, as I mentioned, HIV attacks your immune system. Basically, what happens is that your immune system is attacked by the HIV virus. It's kind of like a computer hacker. It hacks into your white blood cells and it tricks your body into replicating HIV in your system. So that's why it's so hard to get a cure for it right now. Now, I'll talk about the pathology later in this presentation. And as mentioned before, people with AIDS don't necessarily die right away. Because of medication, they could live easily up to 10 years. But this is also if they change their lifestyle so that they eat regularly and look after themselves and take their medication. So who are the famous people that had AIDS? There was actually a video on somebody who passed away with AIDS. Rapper Eazy-E died from it at the age of 30, and he got it from unprotected sex. So a lot of kids, actually, when we do training in the communities, a lot of kids actually recognize the movie right out of Compton. So rapper Eazy-E died from AIDS from unprotected sex. The other person that died from AIDS is supermodel Gia, and she has a movie as well, but it's not on Netflix. I actually saw it on TV. I didn't see it, but I saw that it was on a lineup, and I forgot to watch it. But it is on TV if you look out for it. So the HIV transmission equation, you actually have to have three things in order to get HIV. It's not that easy. You have to have all three things for the possibility of HIV transmitting. So the first thing is body fluid, plus the direct opening, plus the activity, equals the possibility of HIV transmission. And HIV is transmitted from one person to the next. And the other important thing, which I'll repeat quite a bit in this presentation, is that HIV cannot survive outside of the body for longer than 4 minutes. So it's a good thing to remember. So what are the 5 body fluids that transmits HIV? Blood, vaginal fluid, anal fluid, semen, cum, pre-cum, and breast milk. And we're out in the community, and one of our youth participants had a really good explanation of what pre-cum is, because I guess he had a lot of peers who were asking, what is it? So when you go to a restaurant or a takeout restaurant, you get the packets of mustard. So you remember when you open that packet of mustard and you open it and you try to get your mustard out and this fluid comes out before your actual mustard comes out. That's actually what pre-cum is. So I really like that explanation. So that's one of the bodily fluids that can transmit HIV. And remember, HIV can transmit from one person to the next. So what are the direct openings that are part of the transmission equation? The activities actually involve something called wet skin or your mucous membranes. That's the wet skin that's inside of your nose, inside of your ears, inside of your mouth, inside of your throat, and inside of your genital areas and your anus. And what Alan was telling me is that the other part is in the anus, it's the receptor cells, right? Yeah. So those are the things that cause your direct openings. And the reason that the wet skin is important to remember is that mucous membranes are easy to rip or tear with the activity that I'm going to talk about later. they could rip and tear and expose you to STIs or HIV. So another direct opening was occupational exposure. So people who work in emergency response or in the healthcare setting can get HIV through skin piercing or tattooing. Skin piercing, I know that a lot of kids back in the day, or skin piercing or tattoos, I know that we used to do that a lot in our own homes and stuff. That's not advisable because you might pass on something from one person to the next when you're home piercing, because you might not sterilize the needle before doing it on to the next person. So it's recommended that people go to a tattoo artist or a place that does piercing. So transmission activity. The activity that provides transmission is unprotected sex. That includes vaginal, anal, or oral. It also includes shared needles or equipment for injection drugs, and unsterilized needles, as I explained before, with piercing or tattooing. And that also includes the tongue and body. And from a pregnant mother who has HIV can pass it on to her child, which makes sense. So it is possible for somebody who has HIV, like an HIV mother, to give birth to a child without passing it on to her baby. She would have to work with her doctor with a birthing plan, and usually she would have to have it as a C-section. So another thing is that once the baby is born, she won't be able to breastfeed. She'll have to use formula. So that it is possible for an HIV mother to have a baby. Actually, I do know a couple of women who have had HIV and didn't pass it on to their baby. So next we're going to talk about the common facts about HIV, basically dispelling myths about HIV. The good thing about HIV is that it's 100% preventable. The bad thing is that there is no cure for it yet. So a person living with HIV may look healthy and feel good just like you, which is deceiving. But a good thing is that if you know what passes HIV, then you don't have to be scared of somebody who has it. So for example, we get a lot of questions in the community about what does transmit HIV. And we know that saliva, sweat, and tears does not transmit it. As we explained before, the 5 bodily fluids does not include those things. So it is safe to shake somebody's hand. It's safe to hug them. It's safe to even use the same toilet. You could even share pop or share smoke, share a straw with somebody, or drink from the same glass with somebody who has HIV, and you don't have to be scared of getting it. Eileen Prince had a really good explanation. She's from Nakasley. She used to be the health director for Nakasley. She had a really good explanation about this. She said that if it was that easy to get HIV, then we'd have a lot more people that have it. So I think that's a good thing to remember. And that's actually what I say to every community when we provide education in there. And like I explained, you can't get HIV through cats or dogs or mosquito bites. And that's another question that we get a lot. So you don't have to be scared of getting it through mosquitoes. And the reason for that is the reminder that H in HIV means human, meaning it can't survive outside of humans. So next we're going to talk about how to do the floor exercise. So this might be confusing to other viewers that haven't received the Healthy Sexuality Kit. Don't fear. Most of the communities that wanted it have it. So this is just a quick explanation of how to use them. So you have these floor exercise kits. So what we do is we place the yes, maybe, and no cards on the table, or ideally we want to put them on the floor, but for this demonstration we're just going to put it on the table. And what you do is you take your cards and you hand it out to your participants. So I have my lovely assistants here. So you give each of the participants, I would say up to 2 cards, but since this is a video, we're going to do all of them. There's actually 40 cards, so I wouldn't advise using all 40 cards for your participants, or it's going to take forever. So what I would suggest is picking the top cards that the activities that are problems in the community, and hand those out instead of handing all 40 cards, because otherwise the exercise is going to take really long and your participants are going to get bored. But the good thing is that it gets people moving and it's a good activity to do. And thank you, Chimamuk. We actually got permission from Chimamuk Aboriginal Program through the BC Centre for Disease Control to replicate the cards. So what we did is we hired an artist to draw the cards for us. So what you do is you tell your lovely participants to look at their cards and answer the question, does that activity transmit HIV? So the number one question I always get is, how can I tell what's on the activity? So if you look behind the card, at the back, there's writing on it. So that tells you what the eagles are doing. So put it in the right pile. Put it on, if that activity transmit HIV, put it under the yes. If it might, put it under maybe. If no, put it under no. And then give them time to think and figure out. So this is where you thank your participants. And I also forgot to mention that when you give out the cards, just tell them to put it where they think that it should go, and then not to worry if it's right or wrong. And what you do is, once everybody has placed their cards down, go to your yes column and pick up the yes cards. And then what you do is, this is where it becomes more of a group. You ask the whole group whether or not it's in the right pile. So what you do is, so sharing toothbrush, does that transmit HIV? And usually people will say no, and that's right, because there's no saliva doesn't transmit HIV, so you would put it under the no column. And after a while, when you do this, the whole group gets together and they say it collectively. So you could go ahead and say yes or no. So, mother breastfeeding, does that transmit HIV? Yes, it does, so it's in the right. And you don't have to say yes or it's in the right pile or no pile. You just replace it into the correct pile. That way you don't make people feel uncomfortable for making the wrong decision. Sharing a crack pipe, does that transmit HIV? And then lots of people would say no, but actually it's yes. And the reason is because HIV, when you're sharing a crack pipe, your lips become really cracked and sore from doing injection or from using crack, and because it cracks, it could bleed, and that way it could transmit to somebody else. So what we do is we ask people, if they're doing crack, to get their own straw and not share their straw. That way they could keep themselves protected. So it goes under the yes column. Sharing piercing equipment, yes, that does transmit HIV, because as explained before, if it's unsterilized, you could pass it to another person. So that's why you shouldn't share piercing equipment. Having vaginal sex, or what we heard it was also called is carpet munching, yes, that does transmit HIV if it's unprotected. There was nothing in the maybe column, so we're going to go to the no column. Oh, does shaking hands transmit HIV? No, it doesn't, because Sweat doesn't transmit HIV, only blood and all the other fluids. Spitting, does spitting transmit HIV? No, it doesn't, because saliva doesn't transmit HIV. And sharing meal cutlery, no, saliva doesn't transmit HIV. Mosquito bite. A lot of people like to put this in the yes column because mosquitoes, they think that mosquito has blood. Of course it's going to transmit HIV, but remember with HIV, H means human. It only survives in humans, not in animals or anything. So it goes under no. Hugging, does it transmit HIV? And then usually everybody says no by now because they're getting the idea of it. So what's good about this exercise that it gives people a visual of what activities does not transmit HIV. Hugging doesn't because there's no HIV in sweat. Sharing a same toilet doesn't transmit HIV as well because it doesn't survive in sweat. How does somebody get HIV testing? Actually, one of the main questions that we get in the communities is people are worried that once they get tested that the band office is going to tell everybody that they got tested for HIV, and that's just not the case. There's laws that prevent people from telling others about the HIV testing. So Northern Health won't disclose your test results without your permission, and neither will the Band Health Office. So a person doesn't need to be scared to get tested in their communities. In fact, we know of some communities where some of the people demanded to know what the test results of a person that they thought had HIV, and the health staff weren't allowed to tell them because it's against the law. So what kind of testing is available is what they call rapid testing. It's called point of care testing. What's good about that is that it doesn't involve a blood draw. What they do is they get their finger pricked, and then they squeeze out a little bit of blood, and that's just enough so that they could tell whether or not there's the HIV antibody in your blood. And they could get their results within 20 minutes. So the reason why it's more readily available in your communities is because when people want to get tested, they don't want to wait until they get driven to a health center to get tested. So that's the reason why point of care testing is readily available in your communities. There is a possibility, though, that if you get tested and it's positive, that it's actually called a false positive, meaning it's not really positive until you get a blood draw. What I mean is that it could say that you're positive, but actually it's a false positive, meaning you won't get, it's not actually positive. So just to be sure, even if it's false positive, they'll check with a blood draw to make absolutely sure whether or not you have HIV. And at that time, it might be negative. So that's a good thing to know. If you do go for a blood draw test, it takes up to 2 weeks for you to get your results. And like I said, it's not transferred through your health department. It's actually told directly to the patient. After potential exposure to HIV, it's good for a person to wait at least 4 to 6 weeks or 3 months to get tested. And the reason is because there isn't enough antibodies in your blood for it to be detectable. So it's good to wait. It's what you call a window period for you to get your HIV results. So why do you think people should get tested? Well, first, it's to find out your HIV status, to make sure that you live long and healthier. It's also a good thing to protect your partner. And if you're pregnant, it's good so that you reduce the chance of passing the virus to your baby. And how often do you think you should get tested? We usually say, I know that with when you get your regular checkup, doctors are more and more asking for it to be, asking people if they want to get tested just as part of their regular checkup, so it's not as stigmatized as it was before. So where do I go for testing? You could get it if it's available through your community health office, or you could go to the nearest Northern Health Clinic or your doctor's office. Another place was at needle exchange programs, and as I explained before, you could even go get your HIV testing through anonymous testing. Unfortunately, there isn't any anonymous testing up here in northern BC, but you could get it down in the mainland, down in Vancouver area. So now I'm going to talk about the quick pathology of HIV. It's going to be quick and painless, don't worry. So as I alluded to before, HIV is kind of like a computer hacker. It hacks into your into your white blood cells and tricks it into replicating HIV in your body. So what happens is it attacks your CD4 part of your blood, which is what you call your white blood cells. And the significance of that is that your CD4 is actually like your general, like if you're thinking of like an army. It's a general that tells your body what to attack in your disease, and it also gives the instructions to your body of how to attack the diseases in your body. So the reason that CD4 is important to remember is that that is actually what the HIV attacks in your body. So the good thing is that the HIV medication today is, what it does is it blocks the HIV virus from being replicated in your body. It has various ways of doing that on a cellular level. And thankfully, the new medication today allows people to live a lot longer than back in the 80s. So what are the stages of HIV? As you see on the graph, the red line is the viral load, and the CD4 is the blue line. So the CD4 is, if you could see, like I'm a BCom student, so I like graphs. So the CD4 is that blue line, and it's in a negative slope, and the viral load is the red line. And as you could see, at the beginning when there's no HIV, the CD4 is right up here, whereas the viral load is right down here, so the direct opposites. So when you're in the acute stage, meaning when you're firstly exposed to HIV, the person's viral load spikes up for the first 12 weeks. And for those first 12 weeks, the person who is exposed to HIV will get the flu-like symptoms and will generally feel really sick. And when I'm talking flu, it's not like the regular flu, it's like a flu that doesn't go away. And of course, it has other kind of symptoms. So after that first 12 weeks, the viral load spikes down again, and then the symptoms will go away. And that's where it's dangerous, because they think that they just had the flu, and if they don't get tested, they're not going to know, and they might have a chance of transferring it to another person. So another question that I do get is, when it gets to that point, people think that because they're not showing any symptoms of having HIV, they think that they're vulnerable, or they developed immunity to it, but that's not the case. It just means that they don't realize that they have HIV, and they still have a possibility of transferring it to somebody. You can't be a carrier of HIV and not get it. It just means that you don't have any symptoms, so you don't think that you have it. So after that's called the asymptomatic phase, meaning that you don't have any symptoms. So the next stage is the symptomatic stage. And as you could see, the CD4 count goes lower, even lower than back in the asymptomatic stage, is when the symptoms start coming. And when the symptoms start coming, they start gradually increasing in intensity. And so will your viral load. Your viral load will start increasing in intensity. Then finally, as you could see on the graph, the CD4 count and the viral load will start to intersect, and that number is at 200. Once 200 hits, that's where generally AIDS starts. And as you could see in the graph, the viral load starts spiking up quickly, and the CD4 count is at 200. It keeps going down lower until the end where the viral load is at its maximum and the CD4 count is lower. And that makes sense because, as we explained before, the CD4 is the one that helps to fight diseases, so it makes sense that it would spike there. So that was not that painful, was it? So next, Alan Mousseau is going to tell his personal story about HIV.
My name is Alan. I'm 60 years old. I'm Ojibwe and HIV positive. I was diagnosed in 1984. I'm what they consider a long-term survivor. When I was diagnosed, I didn't ask for a diagnosis. The doctor did it behind my back. And the news was shocking. He told me, I have good news and bad news. I said, well, what's the good news? He said, no. I said, there's no good news. He said, I was trying to cheer you up. Very unethical. So I said, well, what's the bad news? He said, you're HIV positive. I wasn't expecting that. He told me, you have 5 years to live. That was back in 1984. So I'm been positive now for going on 34 years. When I was first diagnosed, it was like a death sentence. That's what he said. So I thought right away, 5 years to live. I wanted to commit suicide right away, outside the doctor's office. I don't know what stopped me, but I guess the mind is more powerful than what I was by myself. I saw a bus coming down Granville and I was going to jump in front of it. But no, I didn't. I'm glad I didn't. I wouldn't be here today. That was 34 years ago I was diagnosed. I didn't know what HIV was. I guess my lifestyle is what got me infected. I thought nobody would care. Nobody cared about me. But I really didn't tell anybody right away when I was HIV positive, because I didn't know what it was and how people would react. But I did see people in the city who were HIV positive, and they were skeletal. They had splotches on them, purple splotches on their body, or different colors. And that, I guess that was the HIV coming out. I was put on medication right away, and they wanted to know how I would react to the medicine, the HIV meds. They put me on 3 meds right away, and one of them was a really strong medication. It had side effects. I took it for about a month, and within that month I was getting more sick than getting the benefits out of the medication. And then I became a lab rat, that's what I say, for the medications. And they asked me, what are you going to do? What's going to happen to you? Like, I said, well, if I die, we'll know. I sort of laughed at them. I said, we won't be taking those anymore, will we? Because I'll be dead. So I took it with a sense of humor. I took my HIV with a sense of humor and the medication, which kept me going. And then they were telling me, this is a gay disease, it's a virus. And I said, well, how could a virus be so smart to go around picking on people that are gay? Because they told me it was a gay disease. And I said, oh my gosh, it's a smart virus. It only goes after gay people. I guess I picked up more knowledge after being diagnosed. I did my own research, listened to the doctor. I read a lot on HIV, because whatever you hear on TV or the media is not necessarily true. Knowledge is your best medicine. My pills here today, this is my second regimen. My first regimen, I quit it because a friend of mine who was taking medication similar to mine gave him a heart attack. So I thought, oh no, I'm not going to die from a heart attack. So I quit, and the doctor said, you shouldn't have quit. He said, now you have to do the second regimen, because the first regimen won't work anymore. And the medication that I'm taking is the Darunavir. That costs $1,330. I don't know where to get the 31 cents from. And then there's Ritonavir. That comes up to $86.24. And then there's, I don't even know how to say this, Emcitrus or something like that. It's got Tonavir in it, and that costs $113.36. These are the medications that I take that come with side effects. And I'm glad the government in BC, we get this provided. So if I were to buy that, I think I'll be long gone. And then I have to take these for the side effects. And don't you think these would have side effects? Just pills on top of pills. I'm really thankful for the medicine that it's working. It ain't a cure. These are the things the person has to face who are HIV positive. It controls your life. You don't control your life. I have to live around medication. I have to live around people that are healthy. Because if I hang around with people who are not healthy, I'm more susceptible to picking up infections like colds, flus. And then there's other factors that play in being diagnosed. My family, for instance, I never told them. I was afraid. I was afraid to tell my friends. I thought maybe they would keep their distance, because when I was diagnosed, I heard horrible stories about people who weren't allowed back home, back on the reserves. They were just shut out because it's got a stigma attached to it. They have education and knowledge. That's what you need to stop the stigma. Not to be afraid of one another. You know, just care. Just say, I care. That's good enough. And I just want to live normally. Just like everybody else. Only difference is I'm HIV positive. And it's good to have family backing up, especially those ones who are learning about HIV. That's how my family is. They care. They didn't push me away, which I thought they would be doing, but they never did. They welcomed me back home with open arms.
For more information, contact your doctor or a community health nurse or most walk-in clinics, educators or health program leads. Thank you and have a great day.
Acho